Hello, hello. Imagine showing up on your closing day only to discover that the refrigerator in the house you're buying is gone, the seller never finished their agreed upon repairs, or there's a big giant hole in the wall from them moving. That is exactly why the final walkthrough exists. So, today in our No BS Homebuyers live series, we are breaking down the home buying process into simple, no BS steps so you can go from thinking about owning to actually owning. And we are going to break down the final walkthrough, some of the last steps before you officially become the homeowner. And the final walkthrough isn't about finding new problems. It is about making sure that nothing has changed and the house that you're buying is the house that you put an offer in on. So let's dive in now. What is the final walkthrough? A lot of buyers think that the final walkthrough is another inspection, and it is not. It's actually different than that. The purpose is to verify that the home is in substantially the same condition. Obviously, little things are going to change, but the things that you asked for should still be there. It should still look like the same home. They shouldn't have taken a bunch of things and should still function as the same home that you put an offer in on. Additionally, we want to make sure that any repairs that were negotiated during the process have been completed. We want to make sure that everything is still there. If you put in your offer with a fridge, an oven, and the washer and dryer, you want to make sure that those are all there. And then additionally, you just want to make sure that no major damage has occurred since you last saw the home, especially in a vacant home. Sometimes you will see a house that's been vacant for a while and someone may have broken and started to take some things. If the sellers are out of state and had no idea, that's their responsibility to fix and get back to the condition that you offered on. So you just want to go in, check and make sure that everything looks good before you officially close, because once you close, it is your home and your problem. So when we are doing our final walkthrough, we are not reshopping the house trying to find new problems to be fixed. You are well past your inspection period, but you are confirming that it is the house that you offered on and in this condition that it was when you offered. So when we are doing our final walkthrough, we go through a bit of a checklist. And I would say the biggest thing is to check for repairs. So if repairs were negotiated, it's definitely appropriate to ask for the receipts of the finished repairs. And if they aren't paid already, knowing that the title company has them is very important. So that way they do get paid and don't put a lien on your future home. And verifying that those repairs were done. If you asked for a leak to be fixed, you want to make sure that there is no leak. If you asked for electrical stuff to be addressed, you want to double check and make sure that those are working. Um, or if there was a certain service that needed to happen, getting that receipt, knowing that they came in and did that. And you just want to look closely and double check that these things are taken care of. Sometimes you'll have things that are up in an attic or very specific, and it's not inappropriate to call your inspector and see if they can pop by just to check on things. Um, Typically, you want to try to give them some advance notice just to double check some things, but don't assume that all the repairs have been done. You need to verify. This is a trust but verify situation. The sellers should be doing what is agreed upon in the contract, but life happens and sometimes things don't happen. So you have to trust but verify. All right. And then additionally, when we are doing our walkthrough, we just want to make sure that the basic systems are still in the condition that they were. Obviously, if you bought a house that was as is and you knew nothing was working, different story. But if you're putting in an offer on a house and the plumbing and the faucets and everything is working, you want to continue to make sure that those things are working when you close. So run the faucets, flush the toilets, check for leaks, make sure that they didn't take any light fixtures. And if they did they replace it with something comparable? And again, that probably would have been noted in your contract. Double check that the garbage disposal is working. Feel free to turn on appliances. If it's depending on the time of year, double check that the AC is working or the heater. Make sure that the garage door opens, and just kind of check all these systems. Obviously, if there is something that was already brought up on an inspection and wasn't asked to be fixed, that's not something you get fixed now all of a sudden. But if you did negotiate that something was to be fixed, then check and make sure. But we want to also check that all of the items that were included are still there. So walk through, make sure that all of your appliances are in there. If you specifically wrote in certain appliances that are maybe a little out of the norm, make sure they're there. I'm talking like water softeners, ice makers, hot tubs, things like that that would still be somewhere in the contract. Just make sure that they're all there. I would say washer and dryers are probably the thing that gets taken the most by accident. So if you negotiated that into your contract, make sure they are there when you do your walkthrough. Window treatments, that's probably the second most taken thing, is like blinds. Blinds or curtains. If you wrote in to keep them, make sure that they're there. And then any kind of fixtures, anything attached to the property, shelving, or again, if you wrote it into the contract and it was expected to stay, it should be there. And most of the time, if it is affixed to the property, it would stay. So if you had like a shelf on the wall that was screwed in, that would stay in most cases. Again, refer to your contract. But if there was just like some standing shelving that you didn't write in, that should have gone. So if it was included, it should still be there. And then check for damage because moving can be stressful and sellers may be impatient and maybe they have a big, huge couch that they got to get out of the basement and they got a tiny little hallway to get it through. Well, if they put a bunch of holes in the wall, that was not the house that you offered on. So double check for different kind of moving damages, whether that's on the walls or if they broke a window moving something, if they tore up the floor moving something, or sometimes water leaks happen. A lot of times these like seals will dry up and then you run the water and then there's a leak. So just double check that there isn't anything like that, like damage wise, that, you know, happens. But do understand moving day can be kind of hard on a house. So we want to just check and make sure that everything is a-okay like when we offered. And then double check that the home is empty. Unless it's otherwise agreed upon, personal items and personal belongings should be removed. One that I see like contested or confused about oftentimes is paint. And unless you, as the new homeowner, plan to keep the paint colors and know that those are the exact paint colors, ask the sellers to remove the paint. It's kind of a pain in the butt. You have to let them dry out completely before you can throw them away, or you have to take them to a certain waste disposal. So if that is something that you know you're going to paint the whole entire house, don't let them keep the paint there. I'll be honest, when we bought our house, we let them keep the paint there. We kind of did more of an as is purchase anyway, but we let them keep the paint there and it sat there for a couple of years. We tried to dry it out, and then eventually I had to get a bunch of kitty litter and fill them up so they would dry out faster because there's only so long you can have paint cans sitting outside your house. So that's one I would say have the sellers take care of that. It's a little less of a headache. And then also additionally, trash should be removed. The garage should be cleared out. Any kind of like debris around the yard should be cleared out. Uh, it should be a pretty blank slate when you walk in there. And then the seller needs to understand that they're leaving the house, not their junk. It's not your responsibility to clean that up. So they can act accordingly. And then here's the thing. What if they didn't do one of these things that we just talked about? What if something is wrong? Well, good news. Finding an issue doesn't automatically mean that the closing is canceled. There are many solutions that you will find all along the process of purchasing a home in real estate. But for this specific situation, there are some possible solutions to just quickly cover. One would be the seller fixes it. Just flat out gets over there, fixes it before you close. Right before you close, you go check the house again. If it's fixed, a-okay. Otherwise, there is a credit at closing. I've had sellers write a check for some wall repairs. I've had them like prepay a contractor to do some repairs. And then in situations where maybe a contractor can't get in time and you want to close as planned, you can do what is called an escrow holdback. This is not something I recommend if you don't have to do it because it can get contentious. But essentially, what it is let's say you had hail on the day before you close, and you know that you're going to need a new roof, but you don't want to wait 2 weeks for a new roof to get on, and you don't want to have to delay closing that long. So, what you do is you get a quote for the new roof. Let's just keep it easy, $10,000. Most places are going to require you to escrow 1.5 times whatever the cost is. So 10,000 plus 5,000, which is half of the cost. So $15,000 should be in an escrow account. And that money is then used to replace the roof after you close. And so that can be a solution. And again, I hesitate to do that. There should be some timelines set on this, limitations of maximums, and everything should be really spelled out so there's not any issues later. And if you are changing the contractor halfway through, just be prepared for who is going to cover any kind of differences. But just something to keep in mind. But that is another option, is doing what's called an escrow holdback. Otherwise, if none of these options are working and the house is not in the condition that what you offered on, then you will very possibly need to delay closing. And in extreme cases, there may be a situation where the deal doesn't close at all. Those, knock on wood, I have not experienced, but I know they can happen in the event like there's a wildfire and the house is completely gone. Well, you can't really fix that. And within your contract, there will be some verbiage, I'm sure, about certain insurance amounts. So, like if the roof was the value of half of the house, then you have a way out. There's different things. Again, you have to refer to your contract, and those are pretty extreme situations. But during our final walkthrough, we are just checking that everything is as it was when we offered. So don't let little problems concern you too much, because problems don't end deals. They just start conversations and a little different situation. So each one is unique to its certain situation, but there are solutions. But here's some common buyer mistakes that I see during final walkthroughs, or just about final walkthroughs in general. The first one would be completely skipping it, not doing it at all, just trusting that everything was as it was said. You will see this more with like out of state buyers that aren't going to be there at the closing. They have to do it virtually or whatever. I would still send your realtor, send your agent that's working for you, that's seen the house, have them double check it. You need some boots on the ground. Rushing through it, just looking at it all excited, thinking about where all your furniture is going, but then you don't check if the hot water's working, and then the next day you don't have a hot water heater working, so no hot water, and then that's your first replacement cost. So don't rush through it. Double check things. Take your time. Take a breather. And then forgetting the repair list, not taking any reference of what you asked for. Make sure you take that in with you. If you have the quotes, bring them with you, or at least accessible on your phone, so that way you can double check everything. And then people that don't test anything. Now, you don't own the house, so please don't run hundreds of gallons of water through it. But it's definitely okay and encouraged to check and make sure that things are working. Flip on and off the lights. Double check that the hot water is working, that the toilet flushes. Don't just assume everything is fine. Don't be afraid to check it, but also don't overstep your bounds. But 5 extra minutes today can save you from 5 expensive headaches tomorrow or whatever day you close. And just be aware, you were not going to find every single thing, just like you did not find every single thing on an inspection, and that is okay, but that is home ownership. There will be things that happen once you own a home. That's why I always love for people to have a little bit of an emergency fund, because something bad will happen and you will have to fix it, and typically it costs some money. Sometimes it's something small, like a light bulb goes out, or sometimes literally the water heater dies 2 days after you buy it. And there's nothing that the sellers did that made that happen. It is just the luck of the draw. Um, you actually will see it pretty commonly because people use homes in different ways. So there's more maintenance, or there's more, that's not the word I'm looking for, but there's more of a drag on what you're using. So then it changes and then something breaks. So don't be terribly surprised if something breaks. It is not always the seller being a terrible person and not disclosing something. Things just happen. Anyway, I will get off my soapbox because I don't want to scare you too much. But that is what the final walkthrough is for. I actually made this checklist that kind of goes through everything, that if you would like it, just let me know and I will get you a copy of it. But it goes through just the different repairs and agreements, systems, included items, conditions, making sure it's clean and empty, double checking the outside, and then just final questions to ask yourself. So this is really helpful on that day of your final walkthrough. So if you want a copy, let me know. But if you're getting close to closing, I'd love to help you, guide you through those steps if you have any questions. But I want you to be prepared when you do get to your closing day. I want you to feel prepared about your walkthrough and happy about your home and empowered homeowners. So thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, next week we are going to be celebrating one of the most exciting milestones of the entire process, and that is the closing day. So we will cover what happens at the closing table, what to bring, what you're signing, and when you get those keys finally. So this is No BS Homebuyers Live, where we are breaking down the home buying process into simple, easy steps to get you from thinking about buying to actually owning a home. And thank you so much for joining me today. And I will see you again next week to talk about closing day. Thanks. Bye-bye.